So that is where we're going on our walk today, into the dark heart of New London, the belly of the beast. Okay, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic there. I don't really think it's the dark heart of New London, but I do think it is the generator of a lot of the change that we've seen around London on many of the walks, particularly in the lower parts of the Lea Valley, and actually now it's spreading up the Lea Valley through Leighton all the way up through Tottenham. And I think this is where it begins, around the Olympic site, not the Olympic Park itself, which of course plays its role, but in the redevelopment areas around the Olympic Park. And today we're going to go for a walk around East Village, Chobham Manor, and we'll probably go to some other parts as well. Maybe we should even go through Westfield. What do you think about that as an idea? Should we go for a wander through Westfield? Maybe. Let's see how we feel when we get there. And then we might extend it on to another part, but let's see how we go. I want the focus to be East Village, Chobham Farm, and these new developments here that I have avoided on videos for a couple of years now. So rather than take my usual more scenic route through the Olympic Park over there, past the velodrome, we're actually going to go down Temple Mills Lane here, which is actually one of the few surviving old routes through this area which has been dramatically relaid and reimagined. It's the massive Tower Transit bus depot over there. If you've caught one of their buses anywhere around East London, that's where it ends up. Temple Mills Lane must be one of the least cryptically named streets in London. By the way, you will have noticed I've changed from a beanie to a cap. I don't know if I'm going to get away with this because it is a little bit windy, but it's a sign of optimism that I need to shade my eyes from the sun. Temple Mills Lane must be one of the least cryptically named roads in London. It's named after the water mills here that were owned by the Knights Templar in the Middle Ages, and it was mostly used for grinding the corn from their lands here, their grazing lands on Hackney Marshes and Homerton. Then those mills were later used for a number of uses, for grinding various types of oils. There was even a lot of gunpowder manufacture down here, production of lead sheet. Inevitably, if they were producing gunpowder, there was an enormous explosion here in 1690, which was a tragic incident. So this lane here is then one of the sort of markers of the old historic street plan of the area. There aren't many. We'll see later on when we look at some of the older maps. In fact, you don't have to go back very far. If you just went back 10 years, the maps would be basically not very recognisable. So this is a great map showing our walk today. You can see we are down here. What's really interesting on this map is it shows you the sort of scale of change. You've got Chobham Manor, and you've got all these brand new roads here. This is more or less the site of the old Clays Lane housing co-op. And then we've got, brings us into, this is East Village, the old Olympic Athletes Village, as is this bit here. And then we've got Stratford International, and then you have Westfield Stratford City. So this is our zone of operations, our primary zone of operations, and then we may extend it to Carpenter's Estate depending on how we're doing for time. But certainly this is the key area of study is here. And I think if you want to understand what's happening in London today in terms of change, you need to come down here to East Village and the other development around the Olympic Park, which is why it's the opening chapter of my next book, which I have finished and is currently under consideration. I don't know when it will be out, but I'll certainly let you know when it is. And I became kind of slightly obsessed with this area from the time I moved here really, but certainly from that summer after the Olympics. But we'll get to that later. I'm not going to blow all of that now. I should mention at this point as well, I'm chuffed to say this video is sponsored by Skillshare, which is great. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Skillshare further down this road when we're in a better spot. I do really like this this kind of spirally, slightly psychedelic tunnel here. So I'd like to say a massive thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video today. If you've not come across Skillshare before, it's a fantastic online learning community for creative people, the curious-minded, basically people like yourselves. There are literally thousands of classes that you can join on Skillshare. Everything from like illustration, design, photography, filmmaking, editing, video editing, motion graphics. I was actually already looking at Skillshare for various classes actually, and the class that I've already joined is Mark Barnacle's complete guitar playing guide for beginners, which is absolutely fantastic. I was having such an amazing time last night jamming along with Mark, and it's a really great course. I'm really enjoying that, and I really like the way that Mark paces the lessons, and I was enthralled straight away. I'll be completely honest with you, I've not had that much fun playing the guitar in a long time, and what I want to do is, after I've done a few more of these sessions, I want to start trying to make some of my own music for these videos, which would be great. And like I say, I feel quite confident. I'm in good hands with Mark Barnacle. So the first 1,000 people to use the link in the description below will get a free trial to Skillshare Premium membership, so they can explore their creativity. Let's crack on with the video now. We're right on the edge of the first important site, right here. It came upon me quite quickly whilst I was talking about Skillshare. So this is Chobham Manor. You can see a whole new neighbourhood of London coming into life here. It's going to be interesting delving into the names here, all these new street names. I'm guessing Abercrombie Road here is after the Abercrombie who authored the Great London Plan of 1944. That's my guess. Chobham Manor here is obviously taking its name from Chobham Farm, which is quite a notorious cold meat storage facility where the great Ian Sinclair used to do casual work here, but it's best known for being the site of a very famous industrial dispute in 1972, which led to the arrest of 5 trade union leaders who went to prison and became known as the Pentonville Five. It's an interesting example of that kind of almost rewriting of history, the re-narrating of it. Until this would have been built, if anyone had heard of Chobham Manor, Chobham Stratford, they'd thought of Chobham Farm, they'd have thought of the industrial dispute, which apparently became quite a big deal at the time and involved itself in a kind of political crisis, because that was a time of real political crisis. That was the Heath government, and they were embroiled in one industrial dispute after another. But now it's been replaced, both on the map and in the imagination, as this kind of, well, this new housing estate on the edge of the Olympic Park. Looking down there past the Chobham School and East Village, which now feels like the old kind of part of town compared to this, which is brand spanking new. So we're going to have to go for a little wander through here, I think. So this is an A to Z from just 2002, so just under 20 years ago. So we've come down Temple Mills Lane, passed under the A12, so I guess we are around here somewhere where Clays Lane Housing Co-op was. Clays Lane was a fantastic tenant-owned and tenant-run housing co-op. I think there were like 480 people living there that were all moved out of the area for the Olympic development. Well, to make way for this, basically. We are currently here. You can see there's the end, Temple Mills Lane, over there by the Chobham Academy School. So Clays Lane would have been behind me here under the Chobham Manor development. So you can see this area here where East Village was built. It was already being called Stratford New Town in 2002. But if we look back here, this is the 1867 map, and you can see Chobham Farm here, surrounded by, well, that's a brick field up there, and I guess this must have just been marshy land that would have been used as grazing. What became Stratford Newtown, you can see there, is a massive, absolutely massive Stratford Works, Stratford Railway Works. Welcome to Mega City Stratford. Honor Lea Avenue. I remember walking down here on the first morning that this street was opened. It had been closed for ages. I was just going on my morning stroll and they just took away the road closed sign so you could walk along it. It's been really fascinating to just document this. At first I think I was slightly resisting it or maybe trying to understand it. After a while I realised all I had to do was really just make a record as each phase kind of washed over the development. I was given a tour here in the summer of 2013 and that is the first thing that's in my book. And they were going to open it to the public, to the first residents in that winter, I think, that autumn winter. And of course I think it took a good year for the first people to move into the Athletes Village, which is here. This is the edge of it here. It definitely doesn't feel like London, does it? I mean, I don't know quite where it does feel like. So it's constructed obviously with a mixture of materials, but it's got a large quantity of York stone that came from a supplier in Halifax. I was told that they took a great deal of care choosing that. I'll point out some of the features as we go around, but it's really interesting to note that during the Olympics there were 22,000 athletes living in the Athletes Village, compared to, I think the estimates were for just the Athletes Village side of it was between 8,000 and 9,000 residents. I think there's 2,200 flats in the Athletes Village, but of course they've extended it around. And they had no kitchens because they assumed, I don't know why they assumed the athletes wouldn't need to cook. So obviously after the Olympics, when they came to convert the flats, they had to put kitchens into each of the apartments. There's a mixture of kind of tenancies here. They were quite keen to kind of create what they saw as a reflection of a typical London neighbourhood. So if you look at a particular London neighbourhood, you've got a mixture of social tenants, privately rented accommodation and owner-occupiers, and then there's sort of shared ownership and there's sort of in between. So these are mostly, I believe, for rent. I think there are a few that were sold actually in the end, but initially we were all for rent. The ownership is divided between a social housing provider, I think Triathlon Homes, and an entity which is basically owned by the sovereign investment fund of the government of Qatar, basically. The government somehow managed to sell the lease on this land during a housing boom at a loss. Work that one out if you will. So we'll take a detour down Madison Way. We're turning our way back into Chobham Manor here, because there are some streets here that I haven't really documented in a video yet, so I'd quite like to get them down. There's quite an old type of study, I think particularly in London. I think it's called chorology. Chorology. I can't pronounce it. I'll put it on the screen here. But and it's basically where you just log the changes street by street, and I think it started in the Elizabethan period. And you have the Survey of London, which is basically that, where it's they survey the streets of London and they log all the new streets and they log all the new buildings. So I was kind of very sort of inspired by that actually when I started my blog, and I thought, well, at the very least I could just do that, couldn't I? I could just make a record of change on my camera here. Here's an interesting one, Weavers Row. This is great. This is Weavers Row, London E20, which is a new postcode, previously only used in EastEnders. And it's like a kind of like, almost like a muse, isn't it? It's great. This is quite an unusual street for a new development, in my experience anyway. And where it continues, it's called Miller's Row, which is interesting, down there. This is Peloton Avenue for Pretty obvious reasons, the cycling reference there being a reference to the fantastic velodrome there at the end of the street. And I'm seeing this bit here for the first time. I think this is Villiers Gardens, which is after the General Villiers, who was the philanthropist who started a lot of the charitable endeavours around Hackney Wick, and I believe he gave the land that became the Manor Gardens allotments, which was slightly ironically concreted over for the Olympics and destroyed, much to the distress of the allotment holders. Those allotments had been there for over 100 years. Cairn Road, which I think is another cycling reference, isn't it? It's a type of race, I believe. Potter's Row. I must admit, for a new development, they have kind of created a street plan which invites curiosity. It kind of lures you in. I want to go down here, see what's down Potter's Row. It's actually created quite a nice little kind of cul-de-sac. Here's another new block here at the end of the street on the corner of Chobham Farm. So we'll turn back down there to get back towards East Village, the athletes' village. So we're back on Honor Lea Avenue. Down there at the end of the street you can see the Olympic Park. We're going to do all we can to avoid the Olympic Park, because I think I've done enough videos on that for now, until they finish the East Bank development, of course. Scarlet Close here takes its name from the red in the Olympic rings, and there's also Logan Close as well somewhere from the blue, Logan Berries, Logan Blue. And the Olympic colours play a big role in the naming of a lot of the blocks here. I was quite sort of obsessed with that at one point, because I couldn't understand why it was called East Village, because as I'm sure all of you know, East Village is a place in New York, right? And actually they said it's just called East Village because it was the athletes' village, and it's in East London. It's as simple as that. This is the end of Logan Close. It brings us out actually onto one of the more interesting parts of the site. Now this thing here, this is new. At the end of the, I think this is called the Portlands. No one was really sure about the name. I think it's to do with Portland stone, which most of London is built from. And this massive development here, right at the end facing the Olympic Park, I don't know if this is done by the same developers. I don't think it is. This isn't part of the athletes' village. It's enormous, and when you see it from the other side of the park, you see how it just blocks off the end of this development, which is a real shame. It blocks a lot of the best views. These little shops and cafes along here that have really kind of come to life since I was first here in 2013. There is actually a bit of life down here. It's actually quite pleasant in the summer particularly. When I was given that tour 8 years ago now, they talked about areas like this here, the Portlands, these kind of artificially created mounds that were made from the earth that came from the tunnellings of the Channel Tunnel rail link. So it was all virgin soil. It was uncontaminated with invasive species of plants, so they could create native wildflower meadows here. They planted, I think, 180 London plane trees, quite mature ones, and they planted some Scots pines to try and bring a bit of Epping forest back into the sort of like the heart of East London. And they wanted to try and create a landscape of mystery. If it was all flat, then there would be no character and no mystery. And then you'd have these views that extended through the park. It's interesting to note, I think down here though, is I think they've actually got rid of one of those mounds they created. So maybe there was a little bit too much mystery. When I first came down here, so it was like 2013, 14, 15, I really didn't like it very much. I found it quite, I don't know, I didn't understand it. It's so uncanny in London. It's so out of place. It looks like it doesn't belong in London. It's like a borrowed architecture. But actually, being back down here now, I do have quite a lot of warmth towards it now. My attitude towards it's changed because I have a history with it now. You know, I've been coming down here loads over those 8 years. In fact, my youngest son, for quite a while, this was like one of his favourite places to come at the weekend. Particularly on Sunday, we'd come down here. They used to have like pool tables here where you could play pool here. There's a fantastic gelateria down there, which he loved. There's a climbing wall. There's all sorts of things you can do down here. So I have those kind of happy memories of it, of spending time down here with my son. So the guy who gave me the tour 8 years ago, he talked about this point here being the Stibadium seat, which is a Roman word. And I think it means it's like the access through the whole park, the entire Olympic Park. That would give you a view stretching right across. Now, it seems like they've thrown away that idea because they're putting a great big block right in the middle of what was supposed to be the access through the park. So I'm pretty sure that Stibadium seat was originally a big mound there where that playground is. And in normal times they have events and markets and all sorts going on down here. It's quite a nice scene in the summer, like I say. It's really quite good to have your attitude to something changed, altered, I would say, rather than completely changed. I think initially I was reacting to sort of like the ownership of it. Who owned it and whose interest was this being developed? Was this really benefiting the people of the area? But then what's happened over time is you get the human story, right? People live here. I've met people that live here and that talk about it, that speak warmly of it. You see the events going on here. It becomes part of your own life, and then that starts to become, doesn't replace the other narrative, but it becomes a parallel narrative. And obviously in a lot of ways it becomes a stronger one, doesn't it, when you attach your own actual lived experience to a place rather than it being something which is just read about. And that is the gelateria over there, literally called La Gelateria, and that is, I'm going to stick my neck out and say that's the best ice cream in London. There you go, you heard it here. We've still got a chunk of the old athletes' village to explore on the other side of the road there. These new buildings here, these actually aren't part of the original development. These have been added in later. It's quite interesting the way this developed here. I'm going to give you a little kind of potted summary, but it arose from what they called the city challenges in the 1990s. That was part of the John Major government, and I think it was when Michael Heseltine was Home Secretary, and there was the big riots, some of you remember, in Toxteth in Liverpool, and a number of big inner city riots. And so the Conservative government decided they needed to do something about very kind of run-down, deprived, poverty-stricken neighbourhoods in various inner city areas. They came up with this city challenge idea where parts of various cities would bid for money for urban regeneration, and Stratford was one of them. A successful bid was made for the Stratford City Challenge. So this area where Westfield now is started to be known as Stratford City from roughly the mid-90s. It starts to appear on some of the maps, and that's where the Westfield development comes from, which is slightly confusing because I always assumed it was sort of scooped up as part of the Olympic development. But I think the shopping centre and the new station, that was always going to happen. And that became kind of the catalyst for the Olympic bid, attached itself to those original plans. There were some quite curious standing stones amongst the blocks here somewhere that I'm quite keen to find, because there was some interesting archaeology that turned up during the Olympics, including a Bronze Age settlement, a Bronze Age enclosure. Not here, more near the Aquatic Centre, but there were some Bronze Age burials that were excavated somewhere in the Olympic Park. This is Celebration Avenue, looking down towards Westfield. Always windy down the street, always windy. And here it is, look. this lump of stone here, this curious lump of stone. I guess it's just something that was quarried and was put here. But it's interesting, isn't it, that it's been accommodated into the development. Here's another map. This is the area that we've just walked around here. And then we've walked along Prize Avenue. What we'll do is we'll go down through here, and then I feel like I'm being pulled into Westfield. We'll certainly walk through Westfield, shall we? I don't know. A bit nervous about that, I'll be honest. There's a fantastic bit of architecture down there. The Ludwig Guttmann Health Centre. It's quite a comprehensive clinic there, and GP surgeries and all sorts, and that's a really beautiful building. It really catches the sun at certain times of the day, obviously not at the moment. This is a good street name, De Coubertin Street. Probably pronounced that really badly, haven't I? But that is the person who came up with the idea for the modern Olympics. This is Ribbons Walk. This is looking towards the multi-storey car park at Westfield, and this bordered area here must be the next zone of development. And look, you've got a little bit of rare, undeveloped land here. This little patch here of waste ground has been one of my favourite little parts of the East Village for quite some time. See, we're on the edge of what's known as the International Quarter. And this has been like this for a while now, so I'm hoping that it will stay like this. That's the thing I realised quite early on when I started to write about this in 2013, is that actually my wife said you'll be doing this for the next 10 years. So that's why, from a writing perspective, I had to kind of close the door at a certain point. But you can see I could just walk around this park constantly. I could make a video here every 2 months and it would be slightly different. You could just document the development here. Just this zone all around the Olympic Park. It's quite incredible, isn't it? Stratford International Station, which I believe was intended to be a Eurostar terminal, but it never quite got going. I'm not entirely sure why. But you can connect with the high-speed trains which will take you to St Pancras, where you can get the Eurostar. Manhattan Loft Garden. And there it is, Stratford City, Westfield Stratford City. So I feel like we should pass through Westfield. I'll probably have to film on my phone in there, shouldn't really have my camera out. Be interesting to see it though. I'm a little bit apprehensive about going into like a large enclosed space in these unusual times, but I feel like I should see what it's like. Feels quite strange. So basically, it seems that everything's shut apart from food stalls and food shops. Good to see Krispy Kreme's still open there, and things like Argos is open. I can't see much else open. This is the middle floor. I imagine this is all closed because these are all just like clothes shops and stuff. This is Chestnut Plaza, one of the open parts of the shopping mall. This bit here is simply known as the street. It's the more kind of high-end designer type places. And what they need around here is more building, definitely more building. So it's good to see that that's exactly what they've got there. So we're now on the edge of the area that I've documented quite extensively over the years. Obviously it's probably changed since the last time I put anything down on camera, but I think that kind of walk through an eerily quiet Westfield is a really good place to end this video, this little tour of East Village and Chobham Farm, of the heart of New London, the generator of New London as I see it anyway. I want to say thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Thank you to you for coming along on this walk with me. You know your company is always greatly appreciated. As I always like to say, I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be. And it will be somewhere truly magnificent and transcendental. I'm probably building it up a little bit there, aren't I? But it will be great anyway, wherever it is.